Good evening, members. My name is Christina Hellmich, and I serve as curator in charge of the Department of the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas. We're so glad you've joined us for this special program. You, our members, and your stalwart support of the Fine Arts Museums means so much to us during this very challenging year, so thank you. We're pleased to see many of you in the galleries since reopening, but if you won't be joining us right away, rest assured that we will continue to bring you special programs like this one to enjoy from the comfort of your home, and we are continuing to expand our online offerings going forward. We hope you're enjoying the latest Members Magazine with updates about exhibitions, programs, and more. So I'll share my screen now. This stunning aerial view includes the Diang and, as you well know, the entrance to San Francisco Bay. In the city of San Francisco, Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated in October, honoring the histories and living legacies of Native people in the Bay Area. For us, this recognition comes with acknowledgement that the Ohlone are the first inhabitants of the land where the museum is sited. The streets of our great city are named after explorers, pioneers, missionaries, and settlers. We find their statues in our public parks and squares, and their stories have dominated our sense of this place for generations. But who were the Indigenous people that made their home here? What are the Ohlone stories? Indigenous Peoples Day presents an opportunity to critique our knowledge of history and gain a more expansive and accurate picture of the past. Many of you know Kim Shuck, who is featured in the Members Magazine along with Devora Major. Kim is one of our poets in the galleries at the Diang and our current poet laureate of San Francisco. She's a fifth generation San Francisco resident and a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. Kim encourages us as citizens to work collectively as a community to make sure stories are not lost. She hopes that we can, quote, re-narrate the city. So this forward-looking work includes reclaiming the past. To this end, I would like to open our program with a land acknowledgement that we prepared in consultation with the Ohlone members and other California Native advisors. The Diang Museum respectfully acknowledged the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original peoples of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula, and acknowledged that the Greater Bay Area is the ancestral territory of the Miwok, Yokuts, Patwin, and other Ohlone. Indigenous communities have lived and moved through this place over hundreds of generations, and Indigenous peoples from many nations live and work in this region today. Please join us in acknowledging and honoring their ancestors, their elders, and their communities. I invite you to embark on your own journey of discovery in honor of this holiday, to learn more about the lesser-known Indigenous histories of the Bay Area. Current events can be your guide. The toppling of a statue of the Roman Catholic Spanish priest Juniper Serra in Golden Gate Park on June 19th, for an example. The sculpture by Douglas Tilton, Padre Juniper Serra, founder of the California Missions, 1713 to 1784, stood just beyond Walter Hood's garden and faced the Diang from the museum concourse. Serra was the founder and director of many missions in California, as you know, and there are divergent views about his legacy for Native Californians. I took this picture on the left in April. I've worked for the Diang for many years, and I rarely approach the museum from that corner of the music concourse. But as you probably know, the superintendent of Golden Gate Park in the 19th century, John McLaren, didn't care for statuary. So he hid a lot of the statuary in Golden Gate Park. And it's interesting, during Shelter in Place, I've had fun walking around the park and discovering many of the sculptures there. So another recent event, a very recent event, is the September 24th listing of the West Berkeley Shell Mound and Village Site in Berkeley, California, on the National Trust for Historic Preservation's 2020 list of America's 11 most endangered historic places. Now a privately owned parking lot, it was once the oldest shell mound in the Bay Area, almost 5,000 years old. Shell mounds, some several stories in height, were formed by Native people over thousands of years. They served as ceremonial and burial sites, middens, and prominent features of the landscape used to navigate across the bay. This photograph from 1924 shows the demolition of a shell mound in Emeryville. You can see the immense scale in the image. So the Ohlone community hopes that the Berkeley Shellmound site will be restored as a space for education and ceremonies with a 40-foot tall mount, as you can see in this rendering by Chris Walker. This map by UC Berkeley archaeologist Nels Nelson from 1909 shows dots representing over 400 shell mounds in the Bay Area that were subsequently raised for land development by the end of the 20th century. Less than 5 can be seen in the Bay Area landscape today. At Land's End in San Francisco, and I've indicated this with a red arrow on the map, you can see 2 overlapping dots. These shell mounds were used for 1,000 years by the Yelamu Ohlone, who lived in villages in the area at a time when it was abundant with wildlife and natural resources. These middens, now part of the Point Lobos archaeologic site, are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. They tell an Ohlone story many of us don't know about our city. The Yelamu did not survive the mission period and don't have descendants to speak for them, but we say their names and we honor and respect their experience. In closing, since 1975, Indigenous community members in the Bay Area have gathered on Alcatraz on Columbus Day, or Italian American Heritage Day, now also Indigenous Peoples Day. This year, due to COVID, the event was broadcast at sunrise on October 12th. Last year, on Indigenous Peoples Day, a launch of canoes representing tribes and communities from as far north as Canada and from Hawaii, as well as California, pushed off from the Bayshore at Aquatic Park. You can see this in the top image, and paddled to Alcatraz to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz. This was a watershed moment in the Indigenous land rights movement. As the Ramaytush Ohlone chairperson, Jonathan Cudero, stated about the event, quote, "San Francisco is the ancestral homeland of my people, the Ramaytush Ohlone. Our history, indeed our current presence, is little known or understood in our own homeland. Alcatraz Canoe Journey honors the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz and makes plain to the residents of San Francisco that we are still here, and these lands and waters must be preserved and protected for future generations," end quote. Tonight, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day and along with our efforts to expand the stories we tell about our collections, Chuna McIntyre and Hillary Olcott will highlight our special holdings of Arctic art. During Shelter in Place, it's our most recent publication about the permanent collections, U.S. Spirit of the Arctic, was printed, and boxes of books slowly made their way to the museum, though they would sit for several months while we anxiously awaited the museum's reopening. So finally, we can share it with you, and we're thrilled to do that. I'm joined tonight by my amazing colleague, Hillary Olcott, Associate Curator of the Department of the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and editor of the book. Hillary is probably a familiar face to many of you at this point, as she is also the coordinating curator for the Frida Kahlo exhibition. And I hope you've had a chance to watch one of her YouTube presentations or read her web article as you prepare to see the Kahlo exhibition or enjoy it from home. Hillary will be joined this evening by Chuna McIntyre, and I would like to extend my sincere thanks to him for his continued partnership with us to steward this collection and share it with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to all of you for tuning in today. As Christina said, my name is Hillary Olcott. I'm the Associate Curator in the Department of the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about a very special collection of objects that we have at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. So in 2006, the museums received a very generous bequest of nearly 400 objects made by Indigenous artists from the Arctic. Now, this collection was gathered over the course of about 30 years by the late Thomas G. Fowler, who was an award-winning graphic designer, an avid traveler, and a really passionate art collector. And the collection is remarkable not only because of its size and the quality of the works, but also because of its scope. So I am going to share a bit of this collection with you today before I kick off the introduction for our special guest. So let me just share my screen briefly, if you can bear with me. All right. So the Fowler Collection represents nearly 2,000 years of human creativity. There are works in the collection that are quite ancient, like these ivory carvings, which were found on St. Lawrence Island and made nearly 2,000 years ago in the first half of the first millennium. But the collection also includes works up to the contemporary period, like this fabulous mixed media sculpture by Judith Ululach. In addition to the big spread of time, the artists represented in the collection are separated at times by great distance as well. They live on 3 different continents in what are now 4 separate countries. So there are artists from the United States represented, from Greenland, Russia, and Canada. Some of the works in the collection were initially intended for ceremonial purposes, such as this forehead mask in the shape of a wolf. And other items in the collection were intended for everyday use, like this harpoon rest. Still others were intended to be sold, such as this very intricate model of a hunter in his kayak. But regardless of the intent or place that the artist came from, the works in the collection are united by a few different factors. So first of all, they really highlight the raw materials used to make them, which for the most part are whalebone, walrus ivory, driftwood, and or stone. And these raw materials really highlight and evoke the natural landscape of the Arctic region. The works in the collection also attest to Mr. Fowler's keen interest in and appreciation of design, craftsmanship, and form. And lastly, the works are united by the concept known as Inua in the Inupiaq language, or Yoa in the Yupik language. And this concept refers to the fact that all things surrounding us, including objects, have a unique inner essence or spirit that should be recognized and honored. So I'm really excited to say that after many years of hard work, we have finally completed a catalog of this collection entitled Yoa, Spirit of the Arctic. Now, this book highlights 80 objects from Thomas G. Fowler's collection and features art historical and anthropological essays punctuated by lively personal statements by artists, contemporary artists, and scholars. And the book explores topics like the human and environmental interactions and relationships, the connections between the spiritual and the everyday, and it celebrates the aesthetics of Arctic life. So before I introduce you to our guest speaker today, I would like to take a moment and say a few thank yous. First of all, I would like to express my extreme gratitude to the many supporters of this project who made this book possible, with a special thanks to Liz Ball. I would like to thank my many colleagues at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, whose years of hard work went into this project. Thank you. And to the contributing authors to this catalog, William Fitzhugh, David Rubin Piktukun, Abraham Angik Rubin, and Susie Stillick. And again, I need to give a special thank you to Rosalind Tunis, who was not only a contributing author to this catalog, but was a project consultant from the beginning. She has also been a curatorial consultant for the Fowler Collection since it arrived at the museums, and she was absolutely the driving force behind this project. So thank you, Roz, for your dedication and your passion. And my final thank you will serve also as my introduction. So like Roz, Chuna McIntyre was not only a contributing author to this catalog and a project consultant, he has been a cultural consultant with the Fowler Collection since it arrived at the museums nearly 15 years ago. Chuna is also an artist and a performer. He's a collector himself, I will say. But Chuna he is the founder and director of Nunamta, Our Land, Yupik Eskimo Dancers. And he has served as a consultant and advisor for museum projects in the United States and in France. And I'm so excited and thrilled that he can join us today. He will be telling us a bit about some of the Yupik objects in this collection, and will share with us some Yupik songs and dances. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. I will rejoin in a little while for a Q&A session. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Chuna McIntyre.
Kuya nakhatam kaniwa kala gocht kataglechi kon kuchis to ni pichten kuya lachte kutwat bi ngali utapakanta bakutwani kon kuta akkakpak chaut kuya ksikiawat tailri kuya klagapit Tangsklukiawani Anguta Kimta Piturilamtki Tangskluki Kuyaksiki Angutun Taisngal Rate Makutwani Chautku. I want to thank the museum for allowing us this time. We are happy and thankful that we have access and privy to our materials still as Yupik people. Nakmin people, our materials that have come to us, awaken in the van from our ancient past. We are privileged today to give you a glimpse, a very small glimpse of what we've had for centuries on this continent. It is estimated we've been here a good 30 centuries. And a lot of these materials that you see here represented are just the very few materials that we utilize as Yupik people. This first slide is Kazgingok. Kazgi is our ceremonial house. From ancient times, ceremonies, important events happened in this structure called the Kazgi in our language. Men also lived there and did their work from this place. Here in this tableau, there are men dancing. This particular dance scene in Yupik is called Borsa, or Borsalgit in our language. They're dancing in the style of the North. And that's what this tableau is telling us at the moment. Next slide. This one is called Niragaun, or in the Chupich dialect from where it comes from, Gniragaun. It was made by the very famous K. Hendrickson, who produced these pieces. In fact, behind me, there's one made by him right there. These were used as pointing sticks, so to speak, during ceremonies. All the animals on these sticks are our wishes. What this stick is telling us is that we want all these animals to be plenty. We implore them to come to us for our sustenance. We want them to help us survive by being plenty. That's why they're done in this sense, that all the animals are placed onto the stick itself. We are imploring the universe and the animal kingdom to help us survive. Next slide. This is called a Dahuyamarun, a dance fan, and it has a spiritual face on it. What's missing on this particular one are the either the caribou hair that would go around the dance fan or some feathers on the piece. I asked my grandmother one time, I said, why do we Yupiks, we hold feathers or dance fans during our ceremonies or dances? She said, you hold something beautiful, so your ancestors can see that when you're dancing or in the ceremony. They can see that, and they themselves are happy as well. Next slide. This is called Duhkach in Yupik, or Dulok. Dulok is ivory. As you can see, all the animals are carved, all intertwined with one another. In other words, we are part of this fabric of life. We are intertwined with the birds and all the animals, the plants. We cannot exist without them. And in some essence, this is what it's saying to us. The interconnected of everything that we know to exist here. Next slide. This is called kinakok in our language. Kinak in our language means our face. Kinakok is the face device or a mask. This is in the style of a man, and the rings around it, we call that sangok. Sa. Sa is the very air we are breathing this moment. Sa is the very awareness that I have. Sa is the ground that you and I are standing on. Sa is the sky or the universe we know to be out there. So this entity is peering through its own universe. So that's the a mask with the samok. By the way, there's a doll hanging there, which we also call the representation of Samyoa. The doll is recording everything, so my words be true. Samya is the dweller of our consciousness. Next slide. These masks, one of them is in the Louvre in Paris, and one of them belongs to a private collectors. Incidentally, there's one right there too, one of them. This actually was seen by the great artist Henri Matisse, because one of his family members showed him this mask. So it has been seen by that great artist. Our masks talk about, again, the interconnected of everything. So this mask is the loon mask. And the one in Paris, in the Louvre actually, is the swan mask. And then these pieces that are coming down from the wing structure, we call that it's like oil dripping. As seal oil renders, it drips. For centuries, we've used seal oil as our lamp oil. So it's very important that it's part of the elements of some of our masks. Next slide. These are wind masks. As you can see, the tubes on these pieces, where the wind moves right through them. Wind is a very important element in our world. Also, the fourth mask without the appendages. I had gone to UCLA one time to look at some of their collections there at the university. And I was pulling out all their drawers where they kept all their collections. And as I pulled out one drawer, there was that mask. I said, no way. It can't be, but here it is. So we found it. Now the collection is now complete. So during an exhibition, we had brought all the masks so they could be together again. Very important, I think, in the Yupik world, that someday, somehow or the other, we need to collect some of our important pieces and put them together, either physically or electronically, because we have that technology now. These were from Napaskak, these old masks which were collected. Napaskak was my grandmother's mother's village. I imagine she might have seen some of these in situ, so to speak, as they were being used during the ceremony. You see, these are connected to us, the later generations, made by the people in the time that they were being connected to the spiritual realm. And in that sense, we are still connected to these pieces. Very important to know that these don't exist in isolation. They are part of our centuries of history on this continent. They're part of the connection between all of us and the spirit realm and all our ancestors. Connections are important. Now I want you to see a bit more closer some of our cultural accoutrements. What you're looking at the moment is a ceremonial feathered drum at the bottom and another K. Hendrickson pointing stick or pointing tray as it's called. That's a K. Hendrickson piece. And that's another tray or dancing stick. Next to it is a seal mask and dance fans. And up there is the little doll, which is hanging, usually in the old days, it hung from the rafters of the ceremonial house, observing everything. Oh, there's another mask up there, which you can, I guess you can see the mask up there. There's a little puffin mask, yeah. So I just want you to just to have an idea a bit up closer. That's all.
So the first question is, could you please explain to us a bit more about the concept of yoa and about how it relates or unites the objects in this collection?
Yoa, much like the word Yupik, which we call ourselves. Yupik means the real people. That's where the word comes from, yoa. Yoa is the inner human that we recognize in everything that exists in this universe. This pointing stick, Nirachon has a yoa. My headdress can have a yoa. My necklace can have a yoa. A speck of dust can have a yoa. It has all the possibilities just because it exists in this universe. Yoa is what we recognize in the universe as something akin to us in whatever exists in the universe.
And how do you feel as somebody who works with museums, but of course has a connection to these objects, as you say, they're your inheritance. How do you feel about these works being collected by private individuals and by museums rather than being in the communities?
Well, first of all, museums are our caretakers of what we treasure in our hearts. Museums house the very best our civilizations have to offer and continue to offer. Our past can be brought into the museum to be learn from, to appreciate, and to be continually connected. It's the connection. It's a connection point. Then we move forward. It's very important that museums have our objects and are taking good care of them.
Do you feel that these works, what are your thoughts about repatriation and whether or not these works should return to communities or stay in the museums?
Personally, myself, repatriation to me is like a pyramid. At the very top, at the apex of the pyramid, is the bones of our ancestors. Those, without question, must and will be returned. They are our ancestors. They're our family. At the very tip of the pyramid, they must. The rest, materials, they were purchased, they were given, collectors collected, artisans made these pieces, and they were collected over time. I know that there are some grave goods, and if that can be substantiated, of course, grave goods should be returned as well. But it's all the detail. It's all in the detail, so to speak. So, but getting back, museums are our caretakers of our civilization's best. Yeah. That's how I.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. So what do you feel, as someone who works with museums quite frequently in the United States and elsewhere, what are some of the opportunities that arise from these collections being in museums rather than in being in private hands or in community hands?
Well, museums, of course, as you know, have a charge to educate, to curate, to take care, getting back to taking care of our objects, but also to make sure that access is everything. We must have access to these works of art in order to continually be able to be inspired by materials within the walls of your museums. See, access is everything. We must be able to get to our pieces for future generations to continue the work.
That's an excellent point, and thank you for all the work that you do with us. It's been such a pleasure to work with you these many years. So since you have worked with our museum for a long time, what is your personal favorite aspect of sharing this material with the public?
Well, again, being able to have access, but at the same time, the museum saying, we need to get the people who have still in their memories of what these objects are. And we need the language. The language is important. And I speak Yupik. I can give the language to some of these objects if I know what they're called in Yupik. It's important for the museum to record that in our traditional language, because that's where the fine aspects of the piece is all about. What do we call this object? What was it used for? And also, who made the piece? If we can find out who some of these pieces were made by. That is wonderful, because these are our important artists, after all, who have created these pieces and continue to create them.
In your time working with this collection, are there any pieces in particular that resonate with you, or are there any aspects of this collection that particularly resonate with you?
Well, for me personally, is our regalia. Because when I was growing up, my grandmother would describe all of this in detail. Our clothing, our headgear. She would describe all these little pieces all put together. And I still remember her naming all of the stuff in Yupik very carefully. Again, getting back to the linguistic aspect to this whole endeavor. We must record the language in order to ensure the survival of the name of these pieces of what we call them from our hearts. We don't just dress up to dress up. We dress up for the ancestors. Not just for today, but for tomorrow. Because we bring our regalia from the past to this moment in time. And then it will be brought forward from this moment. My grandmother would say, when you dress up, it makes your ancestors so happy that you are in beauty, that you're dressed beautifully. And it makes their heart, it makes their hearts glad and happy. And they see you, by the way. So our regalia become like conduits for them to see us. When we don on our wonderful regalia, then they see us.
Your regalia is absolutely wonderful. And I think I know the answer to this question, but who made all of your regalia?
Well, I made a lot of my regalia over time. It takes time to make these things. You're going to do it right, it will take time. So I've made most of my particular regalia. Yes.
It's amazing. So is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share?
It's important to realize that our artwork can stand up to the very best that any museum can have, because it's part of our true works over time. So, my words are to the artists who continue their work, to continue the work well done. Because what we make, what we say, what we do this moment in time will affect the future. So, we must make sure that our very best that we can muster, so to speak, is brought forward to the future. So whatever we do, we just try our very best. Yeah, that's my word.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. It was truly a pleasure to see you. And I hope that we can see each other again in person soon. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
We're going to end with a song called Kuya na na na. Kuya na in our language means thank you. One day I came into my grandmother's room. By that time she was moved to my mother's house because she got quite elderly and my mother was taking care of her. In the morning I used to serve her coffee every morning. So I came into the room and she was singing. Her eyes closed, singing away this song. And I thought I knew a lot of all her songs, but this one was a new song. So I sat at the edge of the bed and just listened to the song. When she got done, I said, "Grandma, I've never heard you sing that song before. How come?" Well, she said she suddenly remembered it from when she was a little girl, when her mother took her to a great festival. So I sat right then and there, and I learned the song. This was the last song she left to me. You see, our songs are like our baitak in our language. Baitak means your inheritance, that which comes down to you. All these are our baitaks in the Yupik world. These are our inheritance from them, from time immemorial. The song says, "Thank you for my labrets." In the old days, we pierced the lower lips, both men and women, and placed ivory plugs for beauty. "Thank you," says the song, "for I see into the distance. For my nose septum decorations and all my beautiful necklaces," says the song. So what the song is trying to tell us is that when we grow up, we receive our ornaments, we receive our labrets, we receive the septum nose decorations as a sign of growing up. So what the song is trying to tell us is that we ought to be thankful for all the wonderful responsibilities bestowed upon oneself. Pwede na yagakship ko. Kuya na yutangil rangak. Kuya na akakitangil rangak. Chỉ vì su vẫn ca khu ya min cao khoai ai 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 ya ai 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 ya ya khoe na khoe ca lực cao khoe na tu ta nga khoe na akaki ta nga chỉ vì su vẫn ca khu ya min cao khoai ai 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 ya ai ai ya ya khuyên na chale khuyên na tu ta nga khuyên na akaki ta nga chỉ vì su vẫn ca khu ya min cao khoai ai 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 ya ai ai ya
We hope you enjoyed the program. Come and visit and see artworks in our galleries. You'll find them on the first floor in our Native Artists of Western North America gallery at the Diang. It's Gallery 4 on the map. We have permanent gallery rotations planned for the upcoming year, and we're excited to share those with you. We want to remind you that the Legion of Honor is opening to members next week, so watch your email for more information. Many thanks again, and have a great evening. Following my closing remarks, there will be a slide with information about how you can purchase the UA catalog if you'd like to delve deeper into the collection.